Steven in Michigan. Steven, this post I have here is interesting. That says what you want to talk about. It says snow is black and the thinker and the prover. Can you kind of explain what that means?
Yeah, am I on the line?
Yes, you are live. What's up?
Great. Hey, thanks for having me on.
For sure.
Yeah, I'll go ahead and explain this. So, snow is black is it's a conclusion that's been put forth supposedly first by Anaxagoras, who is a ancient Greek philosopher, and pretty much it's kind of about epistemology.
Okay.
I found your show because I was looking for other people that were kind of trying to figure out what's going on, and thinking critically about reality and whatnot. So
Yeah.
I figured if you hadn't heard this, it'd be a cool clip to add to your arsenal.
I'm interested. I'm surprised I haven't heard about it at this point. But yeah, go ahead. Explain to me what this is.
So yeah, snow is black is based on this idea that we can't really be sure about anything. We can't know anything for sure. We have different ways of reasoning and deducing information from the world around us, whether it's through logical reasoning, as deleting contradictions in your thought or speech, and other things like sensory perception. You can feel it's hot, therefore it's definitely hot, and you shouldn't put your hand on the stove type reasoning.
Mm-hmm.
So this is based off of that. The premise is that snow is black because water is black, because black has no color. It doesn't retain color. Like maybe on some like construction paper, with like certain types of medium, you could bring color out of it. But for the ancient Greek, he was thinking that color, it's colorless. So with white being a culmination of all the colors, and since water is inherently colorless or black by his standard, then snow is actually black by deductive reasoning. It's inherently black at its core, but it's coagulated water, so it appears white to our sensory perception, but deductively speaking, we can confirm it's not.
Interesting. Huh. I guess, yeah, a lot of these kinds of, let's call them like philosophy, thought puzzles, I guess. When it comes down to it, the discrepancies come to definitions of words, right? So I guess my first question would be like, are we saying that black is colorless? Or does black count as a color?
For this argument.
Yeah.
Obviously, if you were to maintain that black is a color or a shade or some sort, then obviously snow wouldn't follow as being black inherently.
Sure.
But if the premises are true, which is, I guess, kind of what it comes down to. I don't necessarily agree with the argument, but it's an interesting conversation to have.
Yeah, I guess, because snow isn't purely water either. Snow chemically, I mean, it's got kinds of dust particles and like all kinds of other things that are usually with it, at least if we're talking about like snow from nature. And like the same thing with like the water that we find in nature usually isn't pure H2O. I don't know what I guess though you probably could just make a pure snow and maybe that could count, but
you could argue something that those materials aren't actually part of the water; they're just in the water or in the snow.
Yeah,
but no, that's a good point.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, and I'm not an expert on physics or chemistry especially.
Right.
So I don't know exactly on like if we're talking about an atomic level, whether or not we could really say that. But that's an interesting thought experiment, I suppose. Reggie, have you ever heard anything like this?
No, this is my first time.
Huh. Okay.
So I'm learning about it just now.
Yeah. So Stephen, what do you think about this? Like, it sounds like you have some disagreements with the conclusions too. Or is this something that you hold to, or is it just something you think is interesting to think about?
Well, I think I don't really hold true that snow is black. I think that on some level that we just create, like kind of what you were talking about, it comes down to definitions.
Right.
And then it really comes down to each person's lexicon and what definitions they have attached to what words. And if you want to argue, there's different ways that you could argue these things to convince yourself that that's actually what's going on there. to overlook the fact that that's just your perception of what's happening there. So
yeah, I think
at the same time,
go on.
Yeah, sorry.
No, keep going. Don't let me interrupt.
Yeah. So at the same time, I'm thinking, it does have an interesting point about how do we obtain truth? Where is it? Truth wanted.
That's right.
Type deals.
Yeah.
What type of reasonings are used?
It definitely runs into a general theme of the show. One extra thing I was thinking was, color seems to be a result of conditions of things. Like if I had blue lights only in my house and I never went outside, then everything in my house would appear to be blue. And we could say on some level that everything is the color blue. And right now, we are looking and observing things because we get sunlight, and our sun gives off a particular kind of light. If we were a planet on some other star, we might see things differently there too. So like, it almost seems like you can dig even deeper into this. But I agree, like this taps into a larger theme of, are people really thinking about the methods by which they're examining the things that they believe to be true? And I don't proclaim to have any particularly fantastic, objective, best method ever to do things, but I am interested in the methods that other people are using, and if we can kind of pick and prod and see if they're the best, because I definitely think that the methods I'm using are probably wrong on some like fundamental level, but I am looking for like the best things, the best kinds of tools to use to figure that out. And maybe one day I'm going to figure out, oh yeah, snow actually is black if we really look at it, but it sure does look white to me. I don't know.
Yeah, it looks pretty white to me too.
Yeah,
I got to agree with that.
For sure. Well, Steve.
So well, let's just hit the thinker and the prover real quick. Have you ever heard of that?
Yeah. Okay. That's I might have, but just tell me about that one though.
All right. So it was noted by Dr. Leonard Orr. He commented that the mind behaves as if it's split into two parts: the thinker and the prover. And whatever the thinker thinks, the prover proves. And these are basically like the two most basic components of like all animal life across the world that we've found, and you can test it on them and on yourself if you want to, but it's this fundamental thinker and prover that molds this reality that you experience and go through. I don't know if you've heard of that.
No, I don't think I have. And wow, you're just bringing some new stuff on the table today, Stephen. I like it. So give me some more.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Yeah, give me some like a specific example of, like you said that we see this across all animals in nature. Like, can you give me an example of that?
Yeah. So, are you familiar with imprinting at all?
You mean the process by which like animals look at like the first thing that they see when they're born, and they kind of follow that around, like ducks and stuff like that.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So all throughout life, you obtain different imprints at different stages, and some are easier to spot than others, but basically what it comes down to is imprinting is this setting of what the thinker is going to think and how that prover is going to go about proving this. So if your thinker thought that snow was black, then your prover goes about providing premises and reasons as to why it's black. And on the opposite end of the table, you could say, well, it's white, and I think this because A, B, and C.
Yeah, I see what you mean. Like, human psychology definitely has a way of trying to confirm the things that we already believe to be true, because it seems to just be easier for us to work on the assumptions that we already have. It's so interesting when you look into the research on how people really change their minds about things, because we always seem to take the long way around, at least for a lot of people. New evidence doesn't always convince us in ways that it should, which is really fascinating.
Great, yeah, it's a trip. All right, I'll let some other people get on the phone, but thanks for having me on.
Oh, thanks, Stephen. Yeah, that's great new stuff that I get to look at later in my free time when I have it. So I appreciate it, and please call in again with some more cool stuff, okay?
Great, yeah, I'll hit you guys up soon in the next couple weeks. Take care.
Take care. See you later.
Night.
Cool. New philosophy stuff. That's fun because sometimes you talk about the same things on shows like this and other shows here on the ACA, and it's fine because there's always new people that are into the conversation. Sometimes you go back to a topic and you have more things to say, but this is cool. Like I'm glad Stephen is, I have to look at the recording later to look exactly what he was talking about again and the names he brought up. But yeah, that's really interesting. What did you think of that conversation, Reggie?
I think it was good, especially at the end.
Mm-hmm.
And just like you have to go back and look up some of the things that he mentioned.
Mm-hmm.
But you're right about people changing their minds in psychology and how difficult it could be. That's something that really fascinates me today, because a lot of things that are obvious to me are not obvious to the religious. So,
Yeah, and not just the religious, right? I mean, we could talk about all kinds of things that doesn't seem to make sense. I think about like the anti-vaccination movement. I've been thinking about it a lot lately, only because I see it. I've been seeing all kinds of news stories and stuff, and I have family who work in healthcare, so it's interesting when I get to hear their perspective on these kinds of things. And to me, growing up, and because I had family that kind of worked in that area, vaccinations was such like an obvious thing. It was like, oh well, yeah, of course you get, like it prevents the thing. Like the one time I didn't get vaccinated, which was like quite recently, was when I got sick with the flu, and it was awful and it was terrible. And like to me, there's a personal experience with a clear correlation. But I think what it is it seems to me that there are parents who have children that get diagnosed with like autism, because that's like the main claim that like vaccines cause autism and stuff, right? And they they also had their kid vaccinated, and so they kind of come to this conclusion that, oh, it was this thing that happened, even though tons and tons of people get vaccines all the time and autism doesn't ever really occur after the fact, right? So I think personal experiences kind of play a lot into our beliefs, and that's kind of what Stephen was saying. It was like, well, it's our people's own personal methods and personal experiences really play into things kind of even more than they should sometimes.
that is true.
Mm-hmm.
With the anti-vax, I was on Facebook with someone, and he brought up something that I would like to offer to you as something to think about. And the counter to, I guess, his perspective is the experiment that was done by the Tuskegee. So I think that people have a negative reaction to vaccines based on some historical things that happened that were negative.
Mm-hmm.
And in reality, most people don't really know the drugs that are going into their bodies. So there might be a little bit of reluctancy there. And so even though they may know a little bit about the science, they might choose to be on the safe side as far as being more natural by saying that, well, before we had vaccines, we lived and we did well.
Mm-hmm.
And so they rather err on the side of that, just in case there's some kind of maybe conspiracy that's trying to harm them and they can't verify or deny if somebody's trying to harm them. I think that's the only thing that might be understandable about the anti-vax thing.
Yeah, but I always hear that too. It's like, oh, I don't want people putting chemicals in my body and stuff. It's like, well, if you really think about it, like everything you put into your body is chemical, like on some level. It's just like most people don't know where their hamburgers are coming from either, but that's not stopping people from like, putting them in their bodies every day. So, I think there is kind of a selective bias happening there. But yeah, I agree. It's people who don't know a lot about these bigger, complicated systems that I don't know all of either. Like, I don't know everything exactly that goes into vaccines. I don't know the process of how all of those are made. People are suspicious of these things if you don't understand it. I think that's a very natural reaction, but it's also can be dangerous if people are exploited based on those fears.